Nathaniel had always been a composed individual. He had grown up being taught to keep his sentiments restrained and to deliberate before taking any steps, a quality that had benefited him significantly during his tenure as an attorney, and had also aided him in constructing a life with Aurora, his spouse of 7 years. They had encountered one another during their early 20s at a common acquaintances celebration, and an instantaneous bond had formed. Their relationship embodied everything that those around them admired: supportive, considerate, and filled with affection. However, recently a subtle shift had begun to emerge. Initially, it was barely noticeable, easy to dismiss as trivial. With the late evenings Aurora spent mingling with companions, her mobile ceaselessly chiming with alerts, and her focus seemingly adrift during their moments together, Nathaniel endeavored not to overanalyze. He trusted Aurora implicitly, having never been given any real ground for doubt. Yet, as instinct often does, it started to surge within him, a quiet disintegration of the connection they once celebrated. Everything culminated one evening, when Aurora arrived home later than expected. Nathaniel had been seated at the dining table, reviewing some legal documents, his attention only partially anchored on the case before him. He heard the entrance unlock, followed by the soft, measured footsteps of Aurora along the corridor. Her silence was unnervingly profound, and Nathaniel couldn't help but sense a chill in the air. "You're tardy," he remarked in a tone carefully neutral. It was the first time in weeks he had directly addressed her absence. Aurora offered him a strained smile as she met his gaze. "I mentioned I would be out with the ladies," she replied, her tone appearing somewhat defensive for Nathaniel's liking. He scrutinized her expression. There was an odd quality in the way she had spoken, something that diverged from her usual calm. Setting aside his documents, he fixed his eyes on her. "I've observed, Aurora. You seem distant, and I can't shake the suspicion that something is off." Aurora's face briefly tightened, though the change was fleeting. She sighed and seated herself across from him. "You're fabricating scenarios, Nathaniel. Nothing is awry. I'm simply engrossed with work, as you well know." Yet Nathaniel remained unconvinced. Having shared her life long enough to discern even the smallest deviations, he knew she was concealing something. His heart began to pound, though he struggled to preserve his composure. "Aurora, I need you to be candid with me," he insisted, his voice calm yet resolute. "Is there another person?" For a moment, a glimpse of guilt, or perhaps something akin to it, flashed in her eyes, but she quickly masked it with an indifferent shrug. "Do you truly believe I would betray you?" "I am not that sort of individual, Nathaniel." Her tone softened. "Lately, you've been behaving like a person I no longer recognize." Aurora diverted her glance, her expression hardening for an extended moment. An oppressive silence fell between them, and Nathaniel felt profound, not disquiet, tightening in his stomach. Finally, Aurora broke the quiet, and what she uttered left him completely stunned. "You can't dictate whom I share my nights with, Nathaniel," she stated coolly. "I am an independent adult who does not require your sanction or approval." Those words hit Nathaniel like a blow. His chest tightened, and for a fleeting moment, he struggled to draw a breath. He had always admired Aurora's self-reliance, yet now it felt less like a celebration of her freedom and more like an affront, a repudiation not just of their union, but of everything they had painstakingly built together. "I never sought to claim dominion over your choices," he said slowly, his tone tinged with an indescribable sadness he could barely conceal. "I'm merely asking for transparency. I believe we share that understanding." But Aurora simply stared back, her gaze unyielding and frosty. "Perhaps you should have contemplated that before you started questioning me, Nathaniel." Nathaniel remained silent, for no further words were necessary. The ensuing stillness was deafening, as if the impact of her declarations had already sealed the destiny of their bond. In that moment, he experienced a startling clarity, a realization that nothing would ever be the same. This was far beyond a mere misunderstanding or temporary setback. It was a profound betrayal, not only of their vows, but of every promise they had ever exchanged. Without uttering another word, Nathaniel rose from the table and stepped away. He left the room, gathered his jacket and keys, and departed from the house. It was a serene, tranquil night, yet within his thoughts raged a maelstrom of sentiments. A facet of him yearned to roar, to insist on elucidations, while another part recognized there was naught left to utter. Bianca had already reached her verdict, and now it was Asher's moment to determine his course. He did not return that very evening, and come the following day, he ignored her summons. In the subsequent week, he commenced orchestrating his agenda. He initiated divorce proceedings devoid of theatrics or altercation, as though the entire tribulation had already unfurled within his psyche. He yearned not for conflict, nor did he require validation. He simply desired liberation. Bianca was stunned upon discovering the documents atop the kitchen counter. She had never anticipated his departure would be so muted and resolute. She presumed he might implore her to remain, or at least contend with her to salvage their bygone bond. Instead, Asher had opted for silence. His retort to her treachery was not wrath, but measured quietude that resonated more profoundly than speech. When the dissolution process commenced, Bianca endeavored to contact him in an attempt to justify herself. However, Asher was long absent. He had reconciled with his decision, even if Bianca had not. He needed no elucidation or contrition, only the serenity he could attain independently. As months elapsed, Asher concentrated on reconstructing his existence. He resumed trekking, an activity he had cherished before everything disintegrated. He devoted more time to his companions, rekindled his passion for literature, and even began journeying more for his career. For the first time in years, he felt akin to his old self again. Conversely, Bianca was compelled to grapple with the repercussions of her deeds. She attempted to mend a chasm left by Asher's absence with fresh liaisons, yet none endured. Her conduct had estranged the sole individual who genuinely comprehended her, and ultimately, she recognized belatedly that the erosion of trust was an irreparable void that could not simply be supplanted by another dalliance or ephemeral diversion. One evening, several months subsequent to the finalization of their divorce, Asher received a succinct text from Bianca that conveyed a clear message. "I miss you. I regret everything." Asher did not respond forthwith. He set aside his phone, inhaled deeply, and allowed the burdens of the past to cascade over him. He had chosen correctly. His existence was progressing onward, and despite the lingering ache from their former union, he understood that it would never come to define him. The quietude he had elected in the wake of treachery had empowered him to reclaim dominion over his life, and ultimately, that was what truly counted. As for Bianca, her remorse resonated as a hushed reverberation of the decision she had taken. She had not perceived it at the time, but she had shunned the only individual who had sincerely revered her, cherished her, and remained steadfast. No quantum of regret could ever reverse the damage inflicted. In the ensuing weeks following Asher's departure, Bianca's existence began to disintegrate in unforeseen ways. The void left by his unwavering presence in their once unified dwelling resembled a perpetual pain that haunted her thoughts. She had always presumed she could manage independently, her self-reliance and fortitude appearing sufficient. But with Asher absent, those very attributes manifested as frailties, leaving her exposed and susceptible. The frequent, jovial calls from her friends dwindled. She noticed that her once vibrant social circle, previously unwavering in support, now seemed to withdraw, as if they, too, had sensed the alteration. Perhaps they had not observed the fissures in her union as acutely as she had, but now they bore the aftermath of her actions. Her dearest companions, who had once exalted every triumph of hers, now offered scant more than hollow cordialities. As the days loomed on interminably, Bianca began spiraling downward. The nights elongated and grew increasingly desolate, and the allure of fresh liaisons or transient diversions could not satiate the void entrenched within her heart. She expended innumerable hours perusing her phone, yearning for a missive, an apology, something to restore the life she once knew. But there was nothing. No communication from Asher, no indication that he longed for a presence or desired dialogue. One evening, after an exceptionally arduous day at work, Bianca discovered herself seated solitarily in the living room they had formerly shared. Memories surged forth, the laughter, the hushed evenings spent reading together, the sensation of his hand in hers, things she had long taken for granted, presuming he would eternally remain. Now, with every passing moment, she understood just how mistaken she had been. She recalled their final conversation, the scathing remark she had hurled, the cold dismissal in her tone. You can't dictate whom I consort with. At the time, those words had been an act of defiance, a means of asserting her autonomy. But now, in the clear light of hindsight, she recognized their heavy cost. She realized that this was the precise moment she had forfeited him in the quiet aftermath. Fiona's mind raced as she comprehended that she had demolished something invaluable. It wasn't merely the treachery of her deeds, but also the disregard she had exhibited for the bond they had forged together. She had mistaken his tolerance for frailty, his empathy for indifference. But Quentin was by no means feeble. He was resilient, and he chose to depart when his esteem and affection were no longer cherished. That was a fortitude she had failed to discern in the heat of the moment. Days transitioned into weeks, and the burden of remorse intensified with every passing hour. She had endeavored to move on, attempting to inter the past beneath the diversions of her work and ephemeral liaisons, but nothing alleviated the ache. Gradually, she began to question everything, her decisions, her actions, even her own self-worth. How had she arrived at this juncture? How had she allowed herself to lose the one person who had invariably been there for her? Her friends started noticing a change in her. The confident, outgoing woman they once knew now appeared withdrawn, silent, and restless. They sought to console her, assuring her that eventually everything would be all right, and that time would heal the wounds. Yet deep within, Fiona recognized that no passage of time could efface the hurt she had inflicted. There was no remedy for broken trust, no quick fix for the damage done to the person who had truly mattered. In one of her more vulnerable moments, Fiona reached out to Quentin. She sent him a succinct text, inquiring if he might be willing to talk. She told herself that she merely needed closure, that she required him to understand how deeply remorseful she was. But buried within her heart was a truth. She longed for his return, missing him in ways she could scarcely articulate. The message remained unread for days, then weeks. Quentin's silence was resounding, and the longer she waited for a response, the more evident it became that he was never coming back. His absence was irrevocable. The door had shut, leaving her powerless to reopen it. For the first time in years, Fiona bore the full weight of her actions. The man she had once dismissed as excessively patient and too understanding was the very same who had given her more love and respect than anyone ever had. And now, all that was irrevocably lost. She was left only with the hollow ache of regret. Weeks melted into months, and Fiona slowly came to accept that she must live with the consequences of her choices. She still recalled Quentin often, his gentle strength, his unwavering support, the way he had always been present when she needed him most. But now, all she had were memories, the only things to which she could cling. It was then that she began to discern the true nature of love and trust. It wasn't about control or entitlement. It was about respect, about realizing that no one is inherently owed another's loyalty, which must instead be earned through kindness, patience, and shared values. She had taken that loyalty for granted, and now it was gone forever. Fiona's life gradually moved forward. But it was a different kind of existence, a life without the person she had once called her soulmate. She threw herself into her work, striving to distract herself from the void within. She made new friends and embarked on other romantic entanglements, yet nothing, absolutely nothing, could fill the chasm left by Quentin. The regret never faded. It trailed her quietly but persistently, a constant reminder of the man she had lost and the choices she had made. She would never forget Quentin, his quiet strength, his steadfast love, and the way he had walked away without a word of anger, simply because he recognized that he deserved better. As time passed, Fiona learned that sometimes the silence following a shattered relationship speaks louder than any words. It was a silence that testified to a love lost, to trust betrayed, and to a future that could never be the same again.